Hey everybody, this is Derek and I'm going to talk about resizing images using Photoshop. Now Photoshop is a Adobe product. It is used by a lot of professional designers, 3D artists, web page developers, animators, people who do compositing. So it's one of probably the top tool used by many people. Now it's not the only tool, but it is certainly probably one of the industry standards. If it is within your budget to pay for Photoshop, you can use that. Otherwise you can use GIMP, and I have a video about using GIMP as well. GIMP is a little dog picture. So if you bring up Photoshop, you can come up with your blank screen. Now this isn't going to show you the basics of using Photoshop. Many of you may have it, maybe you don't. I have videos about using GIMP because GIMP is free and you can use that. Since you're not on campus, I don't know what kind of products you have, so I chose to make some videos about GIMP because it's free and everyone has access to it. If I only made videos on Photoshop, that leaves out a lot of people who wouldn't have the ability to download it or purchase it. So I went with GIMP because everyone could use that if they needed to. And so if you don't want to be using the Dreamweaver tools, and quite honestly, I never use them because I use Photoshop or GIMP, but they do exist and we talk about them. And it's not, I have no preference over the tools that you use to create your web pages. I'm not pushing a product or anything like that, so I just use whatever tools I get my hands on. If it's free and I understand how to use it, I'll use it. If I have access to other things, I'll use that. So I'm certainly not pushing a product. So if I go up to File and I go to Open, I want to open up a photo or an image that I have on my computer. Now I'm going to go to the place where I have most of my things, and so I'll go into D-Dallas and I'm going to look up my pictures, and I have some source images, sample pictures here, and I'm going to choose this same picture that I used in my other video for GIMP so that they look the same. So when I bring this up, one thing that Photoshop does that GIMP doesn't really do is it creates a default background image, and that background image, if you're going to manipulate things, you can't really manipulate that. Now in this particular case, I'm going to duplicate this, or I can actually just rename it something. So if I just select, double click, I can rename this. You can either take that name, layer 0, or I can name it base layer. And once I rename it, then I have the ability to manipulate this. One of the things I can do, I'm going to put this property panel over. One of the things I can do right off the bat is scale down. If I use this Show Transform Controls checkbox here, when I select this tool right here, this is the selection tool. If I say Show Transform Controls, I can actually distort or change this image. Now what you don't want to do is try to resize, say, oh, I'm going to make a nice little banner and I'm just going to squeeze this up. What it does is it changes and distorts your image. That looks terrible. I always want to keep my pixels ratio the same. That means the relationship between the pixels width and the pixels height remains the same. It's a certain relationship, a 1:1 or a 1.3 or whatever that is. One of the things you've got to do is make sure your images look good. An unprofessional website won't take into consideration these images and their relationships, and people skew and transform and they make people look like they're extra wide or extra tall, and that just looks terrible. So in this particular example, what I want to do is I'm going to take an image and I'm going to scale it down so it fits within a specific size. So let's say that right now I'm dealing with a couple things. I have an images, and I can go to my image size or my canvas size, and if I change the canvas size, if I go up to image and change the, one of the things, if you do make some changes, you got to hit enter so those changes, because I moved this because I moved this in any way, the computer wants to know. Even though I hit undo, it wants to accept those changes, so I hit enter. And when I do that, I can then go up here and I can adjust the canvas size. One of the things we have to be aware of is that each image has a specific size. Now I know that this image is 1024 by 768 pixels wide, or something close to that. So I'm going to go up to my pixels, 1024 by 768. That's how big the canvas is within the image that I'm working with. My image can actually be much smaller than the actual canvas size. I can have a 1024 by 768 canvas size, and I can have, if I have that, I can still have an image that's much smaller. And so what I want to do is, if I want to scale this down to something, let's say I'm going to go down a factor of 10. If I want this to go, my canvas to be scaled down to 102 to 76, that's 102 pixels wide by 76. If I do that, it's going to say it's going to have some clipping occur. Well, what that means is it's going to actually cut out some of my image. Notice that I have this bounding box outside. That's actually the layer that I have here. I actually can move this, and that picture is only representing a small amount of space. So my image is actually much bigger in this particular case than the size of the canvas, or the window in which I'm viewing something. So that might be something effective. You could create an image that way. But typically what we want to do is take an image, such as this one, and scale it down to fit. Now, one of the things we can do is I could take these handles and hold down Shift, and when I do that, I'm scaling it down proportionately, and I can move this around. Oops, I don't want to move that. And I can try to squeeze this into this space, holding Shift, and try to squeeze this down to fit into this space as best I can, without distorting the image. Now, if I hit Enter, and notice that this is at 100% viewing. If I go to View and I go to Actual Pixels, this is how big the image is going to be. Now, I didn't get it perfect, so I'm going to hit Undo. I'm going to hit Control Alt Z a couple times to go back to this. What I actually want to do is I want to take this layer, and I want to actually take this, and this is what's selected. I'm going to take this and go to Image and go to Image Size. Well, let me see. That's not what it's called. I want to take this. I'm going to hit Control-All for selection, selecting everything within those pixels. So I don't want to do that. Control-D will deselect. And so what I want to do is take this base layer and scale it down into this space. So what I've got is this image. This image here is much bigger than the actual canvas. It's much bigger. So what I have to do is I have to edit it in some way to make it fit this canvas size the best I can. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Edit. And now when I'm working across all these different things, sometimes I forget where things are. So depending on where they are and what I'm doing, I'm going to go down to Edit, and I'm working on Transform, and I'm going to say Scale. Now, if I want to do this manually, I can take this and I can scale this down like so. Holding down Shift will allow me to transform this in proportion with itself. And so I'm going to move this up to this corner, up to the corner here. Sometimes the computer has a hard time calculating the changes that fast, so I'm going to hold down Shift again and push this corner up. And what I'm going to see is that this image does not fit perfectly within this window, so I may have to push it up a little bit and make little adjustments by using the arrow keys or pushing it over a little bit to what I want here. So say I was happy with that, I would hit Enter, And then I can use my arrow keys to move it around a little bit, and I have my image rescaled. And I can go up to view, and I can say actual pixels, and I can see that, or I could say view fit on screen, and you can see that all the different pixels here. I can say view actual pixels. Now I'm going to hit Control Alt Z until I go back to that big picture again. Now one of the things I'm going to try to do is I'm going to say edit. I'm going to go to free transform. I'm going to say scale, but up here I'm going to use something else. So up here in the top, this gives me the ability to adjust the width and the height values. And since I reduced that by a factor of a lot, I'm not exactly, I think I reduced it 90%. So I'm going to type in 90% and see what I end up getting here. And this, I'm going to go down 90%. If I typed in 90%, then I'll see that actually what it's doing is it's reducing the size only it's only to 90% of what it naturally was. So actually what I need is 10%. So if I want this to be 10% the size that it was in X in width and height, and which is what I'm trying to do, you'll notice that that fits right in there perfectly. And I'm going to hit Control plus to help me push this into this window. Because what I did is that I reduced the size of my image from 1024 by 768 to 100.47. So I went down a factor of, I reduced it down 90%, and I'm only using the 10% of the actual size of the file, whatever that is, that percentage, that number of pixels. So I actually have a very small image based on what it was. 10% of the original size is 100 by 76. That's what that means. And so when I'm finished with my change, I'm going to hit enter. And of course it looks pixelated because I'm looking at it down here at 400%. And if I go back to its original viewing size, if I go to view, and actual pixels is Control 1. So if I hit Control and 1 on the keyboard, it'll show me what the actual image is. Then I go up to File, and I say Save As. I'm going to save it as a JPEG. So I'm just a JPEG file, and I'm going to call it, I know I already have an image in there with something sidebar yellow. I'm going to call it sidebar 2, whatever that is. And I say save. I'm going to make sure I have a nice large file here, good quality, but it'll be smaller. And there we go. So I have a nice small image that I can work with. And that's using Photoshop and the very basics to resize your image. You have some options, but you kind of got to find the attributes there in the menus and all that sort of thing. So whether you use Photoshop, whether you use Dreamweaver, whether you use GIMP or something else, just make sure that the quality of the image is the best you can. Don't skew the image, don't pull it in one direction and not the other. Make sure that it remains a good quality image and doesn't make a person look extra wide or extra tall or narrow. You see this a lot on poorly designed web pages. Images are skewed and distorted, and they just look very bad and cheap. All right, have some practice with that, and I hope that is helpful.